Hello again folks, and welcome to another of my exciting videos. If you're a regular to my videos, you'll know I do tend to ramble on quite a lot and I do tend to waffle. I recently made a video about the Hegner fret saw or scroll saw, whichever you want to call it, and whilst doing that video I did cover quite a few other subjects to do with scroll sawing, which I wasn't able to include in the film because it would have made it too long, so you might class them as outtakes. Anyway, what I decided to do was to make this little video which includes many of the outtakes from the other video, and it covers things that are not particular to Hegner. They're covered to any fret saw. Things like the blade use and what sort of stand to use and things like that. So hopefully that will be of interest to somebody. So without further ado, let's get on with the clips. Well, this is my fretwork cabinet, and the first thing you'll probably notice about it is a sophisticated catch system that holds the doors closed. It's actually a rubber band which I put on about 25 years ago when I made it, and meaning to put a little catch on it, I never got around to it, and the rubber band does the job anyway. It just wraps around the two knobs. So I'll take that off and you can see what's inside, and there we go. I'll just move the camera in so you can get a proper look at it. If I can move the thing. There we go. Now you'll notice what I've done, I've got blocks of wood on the doors and with holes drilled in, and then I keep the blades in the various little sections. So I've got two sides. So basically on this side I've got all my standard fret saw blades, the normal ones, and then over on this side I've got the reverse tooth blades up here, and down here I've got some piercing blades. These are very, very fine ones. Sometimes they're used by jewellers. And then I've got metal cutting blades here, and some odd coping saw type blades on there. Inside the cupboard itself I've got some little drawers with various things. There are blades in some of them and adapters. And then you'll see these Flying Dutchman blades in these dental tablet tubes, another way of storing them. And that's about it. I've got some little drawers underneath to keep various little bits and pieces for fretwork in, tools and things. So that's my method of storing the blades. It's not to everybody's taste. Most people like to up and buy the saw, you know, but I don't use that many blades. Being a scrimper, I'm a bit mean with them. A lot of people change the blades regularly because they get blunt, and I tend to use them till the very end, being a scrimper, which is daft really because they don't cost much, to be honest. Anyway, that's my method of storing the fret saw blades. Now, there are three types of blade mainly to worry about. There are quite a few different ones, but for the purposes of what I'm talking about here, there are only three to consider. One is the standard fret saw blade, where all the teeth point downwards. The second type is the reverse tooth blade, and what that means simply is that the bottom 6 teeth of the blade point the opposite direction, i.e. upwards, whereas the top teeth point downwards, the main cutting teeth. The reason for reverse tooth blades is that with normal blades you do get a cutout or splintering at the bottom of the wood. If you use a reverse tooth blade, it cuts this down to a minimum because the bottom teeth are pointing upwards rather than downwards, so they don't tend to leave the splintering on the bottom of the wood. The third type is the spiral tooth blade. Do not consider using a spiral tooth blade, especially if you're new to scroll sawing, because it will drive you mad. A spiral tooth blade is really an ordinary blade that's been twisted so that the teeth point in all directions, and hence the blade will cut in all directions. Whatever you do, take my advice. Don't try using spiral twist blades unless you're an expert, because they're the devil's work, they really are. Now, having said that about spiral blades, there are some people on Facebook and in forums who do absolutely fantastic work with spiral blades. I can't imagine how they do it because I've tried and they're horrible. But some people are absolutely brilliant at it and they think they're wonderful. But I say good luck to them. I think if you want to go mad, use spiral blades. That's all I can say. I'll just take one out and explain to you what they are. This is a spiral blade. What it is basically is a normal fretwork blade, fret saw blade, and they've twisted it so that the teeth are pointing all directions. Now they have got uses, to be honest. If you put one of those, you see a fret saw is limited by the length of the table and the back, so that if you're doing a long piece of work, it won't go farther than the back of the saw. It will lock on there, so you've got to take it out and turn it the other way. Well, with a spiral blade you can push the wood in any direction, so you can take it across the saw either ways or all ways, but because of that the thing will weave about when you try and use it. and follow a line, it'll weave about all over the place. It cuts left, right, back, forwards, everywhere you can think of. My advice is do not touch spiral blades. If you want to stay sane, don't use them. It's up to you. But I wouldn't recommend spiral blades at all. I think they're the work of the devil, folks, spiral blades. One thing I should say, when you're using a fret saw, folks, at some point, probably quite often if you're a beginner, you will break the blade. And don't be alarmed, because you will jump out of your seat if you're sitting down, because it's one of those things. I've been doing fretwork all my life basically. I started when I was a little tiny lad, and I've been doing it ever since. And every single time that blade goes bang, I nearly have a heart attack. I jump out of my seat if I'm sitting down. It always makes you jump, so don't be concerned if you do jump. A lot of people say, oh, it makes me jump. Well, it still makes me jump after all those years, so don't worry about it. It's one of those things. And as you get used to doing fretwork, you'll find the blades break less often. But don't worry if you break blades, because they do break, especially the thinner ones. But once you get to a point where the blades start wearing out and you need to change them because they're getting blunt, you know you've cracked it and you're doing okay. But as I say, don't be worried if they go bang and it makes you jump. Now what I've done, I've laid the blades out on this little piece of card so you can see the comparative sizes. I've put a little set square here so you can see the actual size, and you'll notice they are generally about 5¼ inches long, which works out at just over 130 millimeters for those not conversant with the imperial type of measurements. Now, starting from this end, this one is the smallest general use pretzel blade. This is what they call a 00, 00. Then you've got a 0, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you'll notice there's a space here. That's where a number 8 would go, but they never seem to have done a number 8, and I've never had a number 8 blade, so it goes straight on to number 9, number 10, number 11. Now this one on the end, this is a special blade, and not generally available. I don't even know if you can buy them today. This is what they call a heavy duty blade, and it was made by hobbies many years ago. In fact, that particular blade is getting on for 100 years old, because it was from my grandfather's stock when he did a lot of fretwork. But I don't think you can even buy those today. They're basically like coping saw there for heavy duty stuff. Now generally speaking, you don't need all these particular blades, so don't worry, if you haven't got them. You can get away with 3 really. If you're a beginner, I would recommend not using these very fine ones, because they will break very easily. You've got to be quite experienced to use them. So generally speaking, you can get away with, say, a number 3 blade. This is, as I say, this is 0000123. So that's a number 3, perhaps a number 5, and then a number 9. And with those 3 blades, you'll cover just about everything. These are for very, very fine detail work, the 00, and they will break fairly quickly, so you've got to be very careful with them. I mean, they're not very expensive, so it's not the end of the world, so don't worry if you do break them. But generally speaking, a good general purpose blade would be about a number 5 or a number 3. A few years ago I did buy this brand of blade. This is the Flying Dutchman brand, and these came highly recommended, and they do a good range of reverse tooth blades, and they come packed like that normally in dozens, or 12 if people don't know what a dozen is, and they're just wrapped in wire. And I bought these blades in various sizes after they were highly recommended. Unfortunately, I had so much trouble with them, I stopped using them, because practically every one I used, they just snapped off where the blade fitted into the blade holder. And at first I thought it was me, I'm being too rough, but then again I checked again on the forums, and a lot of people said they'd had the same problem, so I imagine they probably had a dud batch or something. So I don't want to run them down, because they do still come highly recommended, but I was just unlucky perhaps, and I bought mine at a time when they had a production fault, so maybe they're fine now. They do a large range of blades. I'll just turn this over so you can see. This is their leaflet, a Flying Dutchman blades. I believe they're made in Germany, or they were. And you can see they do a huge range of different types of blade. You don't really need all of these though. Generally speaking, the standard reverse tooth ones are good enough. By the way, when I buy my blades, I buy my blades normally from the Hobbies company. They've been listing fret saw blades for many, many years, and I've never had a problem with them. They're not their own brand. They're made by a firm called Magnifiers, I believe. But I've been using those for many years and they're fine. They're made in Germany as well. Some people say they're probably the same make as others use. Now another way you can store the blades is like this. These are those little tubes that they use for those tablets for cleaning dentures. And they make ideal little tubes for putting your fretwork blades in. If you make a little wooden stand up like this, and then drill some holes in it, and you can just shove the tubes in, and you can stand that up near your saw on the bench, or you can put it in the cupboard, and you keep all the blades neat and tidy. But obviously if you've got lots of different sizes, you need lots of tubes. You can actually buy tubes on eBay, I believe, for storing fret saw blades. You can make your own up with bits of pipe actually. There's lots of ways around it. This is just one method. I don't particularly use this method except for some special blades. Now this is the way my grandfather used to store his blades, in these little tubes, and this is a proper hobbyist fret saw blade holder, and it's a little brass tube that's been zinc plated, and the top simply pulls off like that and your blades fit in there. And he bought this in the early 1900s, so it's definitely 100 years old, and I've had it in my possession for over 50 years. I just didn't like to throw it away because it was his. I've never seen any more, but that was the way they used to store the blades. I just thought you might be interested to see that. One question a lot of people ask is, what do I do about a stand for my scroll saw? And it's a good question actually. Manufacturers do often offer their own stands, and they're usually made of metal, which is probably the best material for a scroll saw stand because you get less vibration with metal than you do with wood. But they do tend to be generally expensive. In the case of the Hegner machine, a stand for this particular machine is something like £200+, which is a lot of money for a stand. Far too much for me, that's for sure. So I decided to make my own. So if you've got a stout bench, you can bolt your saw to that bench. In some cases, it depends on the actual machine, but some machines vibrate so badly you even need to bolt the bench to the floor. They're that much vibration on them. The Hegner's fine, you can stand this on a bench even without bolting it down and actually use it, but obviously it's better to bolt it down, otherwise it will move about over time. Now what I do is make my own wooden stands, and I've made several of these stands, one for each of my two scroll saws, and I've also made two more which I use for my routing machines, and they are very handy because you can move them about. Now in the case of the Hegner, as you can see, this is my stand here. You've got to make them fairly stout using fairly thick materials. This is just some timber I got out of a skip actually. You don't need to buy fancy expensive timber. Try and get some that people have disposed of or don't want. This is recycled timber. This is about 1 3/4 inches this way and about 3 inches the other way. And basically I've just made up two stout frames, one either side, and then filled it in. So you've got a useful cupboard underneath. And then I joined the frames up with other strong pieces. I've made it as heavy as I possibly could, because the heavier it is, the better it is, obviously. And then I've infilled the sides with odd bits of plywood and stuff. I didn't buy any of this material. It's all scrap wood that I've scrounged off people throwing things away, cupboards and things. The top's just a piece of old plywood from a table which I've used. The added advantage of a wooden one is that you can attach things easily, like this particular lamp. I've just drilled a hole in the top and the lamp pops in there, and you can move things about as you want to. It's much easier than a metal stand in that aspect. I've actually put caster wheels on my stands, which is very useful because it makes them portable. You can move the machine about as you need to then, and I find they're perfectly fine like that. So, you know, I'd recommend you make your own stand actually, but do make it as strong as you possibly can. The other thing worth considering is to buy a decent lamp to use, because it does make a big difference. You know, when you're doing really close, delicate work, and especially if your eyes aren't very good. This is a standard adjustable lamp. It's got a circular tube on it, and you've got a little switch on the top here, which you can obviously turn the light on and off. And then underneath here you've got a magnifying glass, so you can actually magnify the work and see what you're doing. It is quite useful having a magnifying light. As you can see the difference, if you've got something a bit more detailed, this isn't very detailed, but I've just put it on as an example, and if you move the light around with a magnifier you can see the difference. But it does make it a bit more tricky to cut. I find it quite difficult working through a magnifier. I prefer to do it without, to be honest, but if it's very, very detailed, sometimes you have to. But as you can see, it does bring the image up quite clear. But make sure you get a decent quality one, because some of the cheap ones, they're hopeless. The magnifier is very poor and you get a distorted image, which is worse than not having one at all, I think. If you haven't got a lamp, the alternative is these magnifying glasses. You can buy these quite cheaply, and they're just two little magnifiers, and they are quite handy. Should you sit or should you stand? Well, if you're just doing the odd thing, then as I did in this video, I would just stand up and do it. But if you're going to be doing a lot of fretwork, say you're cutting this out for example, which requires quite a bit of concentration, then I would tend to sit at the saw, because I find it's more comfortable. But it's entirely up to you. Some people just stand all the time and some sit all the time. I do a bit of both. It's entirely up to the person, I think. But if you're doing a long complicated job, it is quite nice to sit down, and always have a cup of tea by your side as well. That makes an enormous difference. This is a little seat we use when we're doing fretworking, if you're going to sit down, that is. It's just an old office chair. It was scrapped by somebody. It was found in our old shop actually, and I took the seating off and put this, recovered it, and it makes an ideal little seat for fretworking. It's got a hydraulic system for raising and lowering the chair, so you can go very low or very high. Like that, look. There we go. So you can sit right up here if you want, and you can get a free ride as well. Anyway, that costs nothing, and if I'm doing a lot of fretwork and it's intricate, I tend to sit at the saw like this, and you can sit away for hours in comfort really. And my grandson, when he's doing fretwork, he tends to use the seat, but he's a bit lazy actually, whereas I usually stand up. There again, as I say, it costs nothing, so it's up to you whether you sit or stand, but it's a personal choice actually. I like doing both. It's quite cosy, this seat actually, and when you consider it costs nothing, it can't be bad value, can it? Well, that's about all for now folks for this video. I hope you found something of interest in it. Thanks very much for watching, and do keep the comments coming. I read every comment, and I try to answer every comment too, and I do appreciate them. Thanks very much. Bye for now. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.